My daughter-in-law pushed me down the stairs, and my son just watched. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. Silent, deliberate, and cold. I remember the sound, not of my bones hitting the floor, but of her heels walking away. Slow, steady, satisfied. "Maybe next time you'll stay out of our business," she whispered as my son stood frozen halfway down the hall. He didn't move, didn't help, didn't even say my name. That night, I lay in the hospital with bruises that would fade and a silence that wouldn't. The nurse said it was lucky I survived the fall, but luck had nothing to do with it. Survival was something I'd learned long before she married my son. She thought I was weak, too old, too emotional, too trusting. What she didn't know was that I'd seen women like her before. Women who destroy from the inside, who smile while taking everything that isn't theirs. She thought she'd silenced me. But silence can be the sharpest weapon. Because while she laughed at my old-fashioned dress and my broken bones, I was already planning her fall, one that would be far more painful. Stay till the end. You'll see why pushing me down the stairs was the last thing she ever controlled. After the fall, I told everyone it was an accident, that I'd missed a step, lost my balance, because that's what mothers do. We protect our children, even from the truth that breaks us. But in my bones, I remembered her face, the way her fingers brushed against the railing before she let go, and the way my son froze, not out of shock, but fear of choosing sides. When I came home from the hospital, she had already rearranged the house. The photos, the curtains, the kitchen shelves, even the smell had changed. She'd replaced my jasmine candles with vanilla, said jasmine was too old-fashioned. I didn't argue, I just noted it. The first quiet theft of self. At dinner, she smiled across the table, all kindness and control. "Be careful next time, Mom," she said sweetly. "You know how slippery those stairs can be." Her tone was polite. Her eyes were not. My son nodded, distracted, eyes glued to his phone. He'd stopped looking at me weeks ago, stopped calling me Mom the way he used to, soft, like home. Now it sounded like an obligation. I studied her as she reached across the table to serve him. Every gesture rehearsed, every smile calculated. She had a way of holding his wrist, gentle enough to look loving, firm enough to remind him she owned it. Later that night, I found her reflection in the window. She was on the phone, whispering. "She's getting weaker. Won't be long before he signs everything over." I stood in the hallway, invisible. The words slid into me like cold water. He signs everything over. My house, my savings, my son. The next morning, I decided to move slower, not out of age, but strategy, because when people think you're fragile, they stop hiding their intentions. They talk freer. They slip. She began talking about changes, subtle, casual, daily. We should modernize the kitchen. We could turn your sewing room into a guest suite. Each suggestion felt like a shovel digging into my past. And my son, he nodded, always nodded. He thought compromise was peace. But in truth, it was surrender. One evening, she came home late, smelling of expensive perfume and something else, cigarette smoke. My son hated smoke, but she laughed it off. "Client meeting ran long," she said. Her lipstick was smudged, her voice too light. He didn't notice, but I did. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked differently now, like it knew betrayal lived inside it. Every sound became a sentence, every shadow a clue. I sat by the window with a cup of cold tea, watching the rain trace the glass, and I thought, this is how women like me vanish, not with a scream, but with silence. The next morning, she offered to make breakfast, a rare kindness wrapped in control. She served pancakes, his favorite, and said, "I've been thinking, Mom, you should rest more. Maybe move into the downstairs room. Safer for you." the downstairs room. The one with no windows, the one she could lock from the outside. I smiled. That's thoughtful of you. Inside, I memorized every word. She thought she was building a new order, but she was building evidence. And that's when I realized love doesn't blind you. It delays your vision. Once it clears, the view is terrifying and empowering. So I waited. I watched. And I made sure she kept underestimating me. Because a woman who thinks she's already won never sees the mirror that's watching her fall. It began with something small. They always do. A misplaced earring on the kitchen counter. Gold, expensive, not hers. I found it while wiping the marble clean. A delicate loop with a missing stone. She saw it too the moment she entered. Her eyes froze before her face caught up. "Oh, that old thing?" she said too fast. It's from my coworker. She asked me to get it fixed." I nodded slowly, my thumb brushing the earring's edge. It was engraved with initials, not my son's. That night, she was louder than usual. Laughter forced, affection exaggerated. Every baby and honey dripping from her mouth felt like performance, not love. My son didn't notice, or maybe he pretended not to. She poured him wine, the kind I once bought for his graduation. Now it was her ritual. A glass before every argument disguised as conversation. "Your mother should really consider a nursing aid," she said softly, running her hand through his hair. He frowned. "She's fine, Nora." "She's stubborn," she corrected. "Falls, forgets things, walks around at night. It's not safe." Her tone was sweet, but her words were bricks, building a story one lie at a time. I listened from the hallway, heart steady. This was no accident. She was laying groundwork for control, for removal, for erasure. The next morning, my son asked if I was sleeping well. I smiled, like a stone. He hesitated. "Nora said you've been wandering at night." "Ah," I said, stirring my tea. "Then perhaps she's been dreaming again." His eyes dropped. Doubt, small but visible, had entered him. And doubt is the beginning of truth. Later that week, I caught her in my study. The door slightly ajar, her hand inside my drawer. When she realized I was watching, she smiled. Too calm. "Oh, Mom, I was just looking for stamps." The drawer she opened held no stamps, just old letters from my husband and a locked box she didn't know existed. I didn't confront her, because confrontation feeds the snake. Observation starves it. That night, I checked my son's phone when he left it charging on the counter. One message caught my eye, from Nora. "Don't mention the stairs again. It was an accident, remember?" Accident. Her word. Her script. The same one she fed him to keep him compliant. I realized something important then. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of what I remembered. And memory, my dear, is the one weapon the clever always underestimate. I began keeping notes, little details, dates, times, when she left the house, who called, the scent of her perfume changing from jasmine to musk. Each shift told a story. One afternoon she came home with a gift bag. "For you, Mom," she said sweetly. "Something nice." Inside was a dress, new, modern, garish. "You should wear it to dinner. Might make you look younger." The smile didn't reach her eyes. It was mockery disguised as kindness. I wore my old dress instead, the same one she once called funeral fabric. That evening, while she scrolled through her phone, I caught the reflection of a message flashing on her screen. "He suspects nothing. See you soon. D." She tilted the screen away quickly. Too quickly. And that's when I knew. The affair wasn't rumor. It was routine. But instead of anger, I felt something colder. Precision. Because when you've been pushed down once, you stop tripping over mercy. That night, I tucked away the note I'd written that morning. Just one line in my old notebook. That's when I started watching. After that night, something in me didn't just quiet. It shifted. I stopped being the mother they could read. I became the silence they couldn't understand. She thought the fall had weakened me, but it had done something else entirely. It had rewired my patience. When people push you off balance, you either break or learn how to land differently. I landed in strategy. I moved through the house like a ghost who'd decided to start taking notes. She laughed louder, bragged bolder, and my son, he drifted like a man who'd mistaken control for love. Every morning I brewed jasmine tea, her least favorite. She'd wrinkle her nose each time the scent filled the kitchen. "Jasmine again?" she'd ask, half smiling. "It's tradition," I'd reply. "Old habits stay alive for a reason." She never caught the meaning. By afternoon, she'd start her performance. Loud phone calls, fake cheerfulness, endless scrolling on her phone that she always kept face down. When my son came home, she turned syrupy sweet, the kind of affection that smells like guilt trying too hard to sound like devotion. I sat on the porch, folding laundry in slow, deliberate movements. Folding has rhythm, and rhythm teaches control. Every crease became a reminder that calm isn't the absence of emotion. It's the weapon that hides it. One evening, I caught her reflection in the window, watching me. She was studying how still I'd become, and that frightened her. Because control only feels safe when it gets a reaction. I gave her none. At dinner, she tried to provoke me with small jabs wrapped in kindness. "You know, Mom, maybe you should let us handle the bills. Less pressure for you." I smiled. "Pressure makes diamonds, dear. I've grown quite comfortable under it." Her fork froze midair. The smile stayed, but her eyes blinked too slow. After they went to bed, I sat alone at the table, tracing the rim of my teacup. Still warm, still fragrant, still mine. That's the thing about control. It's never truly taken, only misplaced until someone remembers where they left it. The next morning, I watched her water my plants. Overwater them, actually, roots drowning while she called it care. "Too much kindness kills, too," I said softly. She looked up, startled. "What was that?" "Nothing," I replied. "Just talking to the roses." But she heard me, and for the first time, she didn't reply. By now, I'd learned her schedule, her yoga class every Thursday, her errand runs every Friday that lasted 3 hours longer than needed. I didn't follow her, not yet, because it's better to let the lie bloom fully before you pluck it. She began testing my boundaries, moving my things, replacing furniture, even suggesting, maybe we should sell this house, start fresh. Sell this house, the one my husband built, the one my son was born in. I smiled and said, "If walls could vote, dear, I'm afraid you'd lose." Her laugh came out too sharp, too practiced, and that was when I saw it. The tiniest tremor in her hand as she reached for the salt. Fear. Beautiful, quiet fear. The next morning, I found her in my study again. This time, she didn't pretend to be looking for stamps. She just said, "I thought maybe I could help you organize. It's cluttered." I leaned on the doorway, calm. "Clutter," I said slowly, "is just memory that refuses to forget." Her smile faltered. When she left, I checked the desk. She hadn't opened the locked drawer, but she'd touched it. I could see the faint smudge of her foundation on the handle. So I left it unlocked the next day. Empty. A test. That night, I returned and found it open. She'd taken nothing, because there was nothing left to take, but her curiosity had just written her confession. As I closed the drawer, I whispered to myself, curiosity is how betrayal reveals its reflection. By now, I didn't need proof. I had pattern, and patterns never lie. The distance between us wasn't just emotional anymore. It was strategic. She thought she was studying my weakness, but in truth, I was mapping hers. I stopped being her mother-in-law that week. I became her historian. Every glance, every whisper, every misplaced earring, I recorded it in silence. And that silence, my dear, was the most dangerous thing in this house, Because when a quiet woman starts collecting truth, she's not waiting for forgiveness. She's waiting for the right audience. And I had already chosen mine. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day that starts soft. Sun through lace curtains, a slow breeze, the illusion of peace. But peace, I've learned, is just the silence right before truth starts screaming. She was humming in the kitchen when it began, a happy, almost childlike sound, too bright for the tension she'd been carrying all week. My son was still upstairs, half asleep, unaware that his world was about to catch fire. I was at the dining table sorting through mail that wasn't mine, bills, invitations, advertisements, and one envelope addressed to me, handwritten, elegant. I opened it without hurry. Inside was a printed photo, her, in a red dress I'd never seen, leaning against a man's shoulder. The caption, "Business dinner. Last night was worth the risk." I didn't need to guess. I knew. The perfume, the late nights, the phone turned face down, all of it folded neatly into this one frame of betrayal. My fingers didn't shake, because anger wasn't what came next. It was clarity. Cold, exact, surgical. I folded the photo and placed it inside my teacup, let the heat curl the paper's edges before dropping it into the bin. Then I whispered, "Thank you for sending it." Because whoever had mailed it, friend or foe, had just given me my proof. When she turned around and saw me standing there, she smiled. Reflex, not warmth. "Morning, Mom. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Busy dreams." "Oh?" she asked, pretending interest. "Yes," I replied. "In mine, liars forgot to wake up." The spoon slipped from her hand, clattering against the counter. For a second, we both froze. She looked at me, searching for how much I knew. I just smiled, slow, measured. "Careful," I said softly. "You could cut yourself on truth that sharp." Before she could answer, my son came downstairs, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning," he mumbled, kissing her cheek, avoiding mine. He didn't see the storm in the room, or maybe he chose not to. I watched as she leaned into him, murmured something small, soothing. Her grip on his arm was too tight, possession disguised as affection. I spent the rest of the morning pretending to read, though I was listening. Every word, every sound. At noon, her phone rang. She picked it up, turning away, lowering her voice. "Not now," she whispered. "She's here." A pause. "I'll delete the video later. Don't worry." Video. I didn't need to hear more. Because betrayal, like smoke, always leaves a smell. That evening, while she was in the shower, I took her phone from the counter. No hesitation, no guilt, just curiosity, refined into purpose. The passcode? My son's birthday. Arrogant, predictable. The message thread was right there. Her manager. Dozens of photos, screenshots, plans. One video file sent the night before. Hotel Hatun 218 MP4. I pressed play, and the truth filled the screen. Her laughter, his voice, hands that didn't belong to my son. For a long moment, I couldn't hear the sound. My mind had turned it off for me. Because pain that deep doesn't enter the heart, it echoes in the bones first. I set the phone down gently. No shaking, no tears, just breath, slow and deliberate. When she came out, towel wrapped around her, she froze because her phone was missing. I was sitting at the vanity, brushing my hair. "Looking for something?" I asked. She blinked fast. My phone. Did you see it?" I smiled into the mirror. "Oh, yes. I saw everything." Her face went pale. "Excuse me?" I turned, met her eyes. Funny how digital confessions don't even need words anymore. For the first time, she couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I stood, brushed past her gently. "Dinner's ready," I said. "Bring your appetite. It might be your last one here." At the table, my son noticed the tension. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing," I said, pouring tea. "Just truths, learning how to breathe." She tried to smile, to recover, but her hand trembled on the fork. She couldn't look at me. couldn't meet her own reflection in the silverware. After dinner, I handed her the phone, unlocked. Her throat moved like she'd swallowed fire. "Why did you—" "To remind you," I said quietly, "that I'm still the mother of the man you're lying to." Her eyes filled with tears, not guilt, but fear, because she knew I wasn't going to yell or cry or beg. I was going to wait, and waiting, my dear, is something women like me perfected before she even learned how to lie. That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the glow of the streetlight outside, not plotting yet, just measuring the space between betrayal and justice. Then I whispered into the stillness, "This is where the storm begins." When you learn the truth, the first instinct is to act, but action without patience ruins perfect revenge. So I waited, not out of fear, but strategy. Days turned into quiet theater. She played the role of dutiful wife. I played the ghost who knew the script. Every word she said sounded like a rehearsed lie trying to sound natural. She avoided eye contact now. The woman who once strutted through the house like she owned it now moved like she was being followed by her own conscience. And she was. I kept her phone's copy, the video, the messages, everything. Before returning it that night, I had transferred it all to a hidden drive, titled with something she'd never touch, Grocery Lists 2019. By the second week, the cracks widened. My son came home one evening with questions in his eyes. "Mom, have you noticed Nora's been off lately?" I looked up from my knitting, calm. "Off? No, dear. Just tired from all her meetings." He hesitated, then nodded. That slow, uncertain nod of a man still defending what he's starting to doubt. That doubt was my seed. I watered it with silence. 2 days later, her manager called the house phone. She wasn't home. I answered. He paused, then said, "Tell Nora she left her bracelet in my car again." My smile didn't reach my voice. "Oh, don't worry," I said. "She's quite good at retrieving what doesn't belong to her." He stammered, then hung up. When she returned that evening, she found the bracelet laid neatly on her pillow, alongside a note that read, "Your car must be quite comfortable." She didn't speak to me for 3 days, but silence in a guilty person isn't peace. It's pressure. And pressure always bursts somewhere. On the 4th day, I visited the boutique where she worked. The owner, a woman named Lila, recognized me immediately. "Oh, you're Nora's mother-in-law," she said warmly. "We haven't seen her here for weeks." I tilted my head. "Weeks?" Lila frowned. "She said she was taking care of you." And there it was, her alibi collapsing in one polite conversation. As I left, I saw someone standing across the street. A man in a gray suit, smoking. He was the man from the photo. Our eyes met. He froze. Maybe wondering if I knew. I smiled, slow and deliberate. He looked away first. That's when I knew he wasn't dangerous. He was scared. And scared men make useful witnesses. That evening, I called my old friend, Rosa, who worked in HR for a local firm. Rosa owed me a favor. Within a day, she sent me a file. Complaints, internal messages, rumors. It seemed Nora and her manager had been meeting off the record for months, and she'd been transferring company funds into his consultancy. Money. Betrayal. Proof. The holy trinity of downfall. But I didn't rush to show my son, because sometimes truth revealed too soon looks like vengeance, not justice. And justice must look like truth when it lands. Instead, I started recording little moments, not of her, but of him. My son's confusion, his quiet frustration, the distance growing between them. He'd ask, "Mom, do you think I made a mistake marrying her?" I'd sip my tea, never rushing. Mistakes, my dear, don't reveal themselves until they're proud enough of their damage. By then, she'd started to unravel. She forgot small things. Car keys, appointments, lies. Every time she spoke, her voice trembled slightly, like the ground beneath her was learning to move. One night, she confronted me. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. "What do you want, huh? Why are you always watching me?" I smiled. Oh, Nora, watching isn't punishment. It's prophecy. She stormed off, slamming the door. The same sound from the day she pushed me down the stairs. The same sound that started this story. Except this time, the slam wasn't power. It was panic. That night, she didn't come home. My son called her friends, her office. No one knew. He sat on the couch, phone in hand, face hollow. She's been distant for months, he whispered, but I thought she'd come back. I touched his hand gently. Oh, she will, I said. They always come back when the truth does. And in that still, heavy night, I finalized my plan, because betrayal is like rot. You don't fix it by cleaning the surface. You burn the foundation. And I was ready to light the match. When you hold a secret long enough, it begins to pulse like a heartbeat in your hands. You can feel it begging to be released, not out of guilt, but out of justice. By the time Nora came home 3 days later, she looked like someone who'd been running from her own reflection. Eyes red, mascara smudged, voice trembling. She didn't offer excuses. She didn't have to. The truth had already started speaking without her permission. My son rushed to her side. Where were you? I've been worried sick. She pressed her forehead into his chest, sobbing. I needed space. I'm sorry. He wrapped his arms around her. Forgiveness is a reflex in good men. That's why they're the easiest to fool. I stood at the kitchen counter, hands steady on the teapot, watching the scene like a play I'd already seen. Space is healthy, I said softly, especially when it's public. She froze, eyes darting to me. Her lips moved, but no sound came. That's when she realized I'd done something, but she didn't know what. 2 nights earlier, while she was missing, I'd uploaded something very specific. The hotel footage, the text logs, everything stored in a private folder, labeled under my son's name, and shared with one person, the company's board of directors. You see, the man she was seeing wasn't just her manager. He was the financial controller of the same company my son had just invested in. Their affair wasn't just personal, it was profitable. And when greed and love sleep together, they always wake up to destruction. That morning, the company issued an internal audit. By afternoon, both her and the manager were called in for questioning. She thought she could talk her way out of it. But her voice wasn't as pretty when wrapped in panic. My son came home that evening pale, shaking. Mom, something's happening at Nora's office. They said she's being investigated, fraud or something. Or something, I repeated calmly. Words have weight, son. Be careful which ones you believe. He sat down, hands gripping his knees. You knew something, didn't you? I didn't answer. Instead, I poured him tea. Jasmine, always jasmine. The smell filled the room, familiar, grounding. Truth, I said slowly, has its own schedule. It doesn't need invitations. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the boy he once was, trusting, loyal, torn between love and reason. I don't understand how everything went wrong. Oh, sweetheart, I said softly. Things didn't go wrong, they went honest. That night, Nora didn't come home again, but the next morning she did, dragging her suitcase, eyes hollow, voice raw. They fired me, she said quietly. They said there was evidence. I tilted my head. Evidence can be a cruel teacher, always gives lessons too late. She glared at me. You did this. Correction, I said gently. You started this. I just made sure the truth didn't die quietly. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. You think you've won? I smiled, calm, almost kind. No, I think I've restored the balance. Then came the sound of the front door. My son. He looked between us, his eyes full of confusion and dawning horror. What's happening? She reached for him first, desperate. She's lying, Daniel. She set me up. But her voice cracked at the word lying, because even liars can hear the echo of their own truth. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Instead, I handed him a small drive. "This might answer everything," I said. He looked at me, hesitant. Then he plugged it into the laptop on the counter. The room fell into silence as the video played. Laughter, her voice, the hotel room, the man. Then came the messages, her plans, her manipulation, her attempt to transfer my son's trust fund to the same consultancy. When the screen went dark, so did my son's expression. He didn't shout, didn't cry, he just breathed. One long, hollow exhale that sounded like a goodbye. "Nora," he said finally, voice breaking, "tell me it's not real." She opened her mouth. No words came. Because truth has a way of paralyzing the tongue that betrays it. He walked past her, past me, out the door. The house went so still. I could hear the clock tick like a countdown. She turned to me then, tears streaking down her face. "Why? Why couldn't you just stay out of it?" I looked at her, not with hate, but with understanding. "Because, my dear, you pushed me down the stairs and expected me to crawl, but I learned to climb higher instead." For the first time, she didn't reply. Because some truths don't need defense. They just need to be witnessed. The next day, the local paper published an article. "Manager and employee suspended amid financial misconduct investigation." No names mentioned, but everyone knew. Because secrets never stay secret when pride is involved. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. Revenge isn't joy. It's release. That evening, I sat by the window, watching her pack the last of her things. No words passed between us. Only the quiet sound of zippers and endings. Before she left, she turned and said, "You'll die alone." I smiled faintly. Better alone than surrounded by liars. She slammed the door behind her. Same sound, same arrogance. But this time I didn't fall. This time I stood tall enough for her echo to fade beneath me. And that, my dear, is how truth wins. Not with fire or fury, but with stillness that outlasts the noise. It was almost poetic that she came back in the rain. Storms don't chase the innocent. They come for those who owe them thunder. 3 days had passed since she'd left the house, dragging her shame behind a designer suitcase. My son hadn't called, hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. He was learning what it feels like when truth replaces love. Heavy, flavorless, unavoidable. That evening, I was setting the table when the knock came. Not timid, not apologetic. It was a knock that sounded like it expected forgiveness. When I opened the door, Nora stood there, drenched, shaking, makeup melting into streaks. Her beauty had always been precise, curated. Now it was human, and she hated that. "Please," she whispered, voice barely a thread, "I just need to talk." I stepped aside, saying nothing. She walked in like she used to, entitled, too familiar. But now her heels clicked against the floor like guilt taking attendance. The house smelled of jasmine. She noticed. Her nose wrinkled, the same way it used to when she mocked my old lady perfume. "Still the same scent," she murmured. "Yes," I said softly. "Some things survive betrayal better than people do." She flinched. I poured tea anyway. The sound of the liquid filled the silence between us like a slow clock ticking toward judgment. "He won't answer my calls," she said finally, voice brittle. "Daniel, he just hung up on me." "Ah," I replied, stirring sugar. "So he's learned to do what you never could. Listen to silence." Her jaw tightened. "You think this is funny?" "No," I said, calm as a blade. "I think it's balance." She sat across from me, dripping rainwater onto my carpet. "I lost everything," she said, eyes wild. "My job, my money, my reputation. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, meeting her gaze. "You built a house out of lies, Nora. I simply opened the windows." She slammed her hand on the table. "You ruined my life." I leaned forward, voice low. "No, dear, I just turned the lights on." "You did the rest yourself." The room pulsed with the sound of her breath, ragged and uneven. Her hands trembled as she pointed at me. "You wanted this. You wanted to destroy me." I shook my head slowly. "I wanted peace, but you mistook that for permission." For a moment, her face cracked, that perfect mask of arrogance slipping just enough for truth to peek through. Then she whispered the one sentence I'd been waiting for since the day she pushed me. "I didn't mean to hurt you that night." The air thinned. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. She continued, words tumbling now. Desperate, unfiltered. "I was angry. You kept meddling. You wouldn't stop. I just wanted you out of the way just for a second." "Out of the way," I repeated. "That's what people say about furniture, not mothers." Her tears came fast now. "I'm sorry. Please, I'll do anything to fix this." I smiled faintly because remorse from a manipulator always comes wrapped in self-preservation. "Fix?" I echoed. "Nora, you can't fix a storm after it's drowned the village." She collapsed to her knees, clutching my skirt like a drowning woman grabbing air. "Please tell him to forgive me. Please, I don't care what happens to me, just make him listen." For a heartbeat, I saw not the woman who betrayed us, but the child she must have once been. Frightened, hollow, hungry for validation that no amount of deceit could feed. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give," I said softly. "It belongs to the one you broke." Her sobs filled the room, raw and uneven. Rain tapped against the windows like applause from a merciless sky. Finally, she stood. Her voice was barely steady. "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but karma doesn't stop with me." I sipped my tea, eyes steady. "Karma and I have tea together every morning. She knows my address." She stared at me. Hatred, humiliation, and awe swirling in her eyes, then turned toward the door. The click of the latch sounded final, like a period closing a long confession. When the door shut, the house exhaled. I walked to the window, watched her car reverse down the driveway, tires slipping on the wet asphalt. The rain softened, then stopped, leaving behind the clean scent of jasmine and endings. I stood there a long time, holding my cup, steam rising between my fingers. Peace didn't feel like victory. It felt like oxygen. And that's when I realized she hadn't broken me when she pushed me down those stairs. She'd simply introduced me to gravity, and I learned how to make it work in my favor. Justice doesn't always arrive in courtrooms. Sometimes it walks quietly through your front door, wearing your son's old jacket, carrying peace in its pockets. 2 weeks had passed since Nora's last visit. No more calls, no letters, no crying at the doorstep, just silence. The kind that doesn't ache anymore, only confirms that the storm has moved on. But justice wasn't finished yet. It was just taking its time, like all elegant things do. It started with a phone call. A man's voice, official, steady. "Mrs. Whitaker, this is Detective Rowan from the Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to ask a few questions about your daughter-in-law's activities at Crosswell & Co." I smiled softly. "Of course. I've been expecting your call." The following week, the story broke, not on gossip sites, not whispered between neighbors, but in the local newspaper. Fraud scandal at Crosswell & Co. 2 employees implicated in embezzlement and asset forgery. No names were listed, but everyone in this town knows how to read between the lines. The article mentioned unethical coordination between internal accounts and unauthorized transfers involving family-owned funds. My son read it at the breakfast table. His hands trembled as he put the paper down. She's ruined," he said quietly. I poured tea into his cup. "No, son," I said. "She's revealed." That's the difference between destruction and justice. Destruction ends things. Justice unmasks them. The investigation continued for weeks. I didn't speak of it. I didn't need to. Each day. The world did the talking for me. Emails leaked, bank trails surfaced. People she'd once manipulated turned witness overnight. It wasn't revenge. It was gravity. Everything she'd stolen simply fell back to where it belonged. But justice, true justice, isn't about exposure alone. It's about reclamation. So I made an appointment with my lawyer, the same one who'd helped me restore my accounts years ago when she and my son vanished with my savings. He smiled when I walked in. "You look different," he said, lighter. "I finally stopped carrying other people's guilt," I replied. We spent hours finalizing documents, property deeds, trust transfers, power of attorney revisions. When I left that office, I didn't just walk out with papers. I walked out with control, legally bound, irrevocably mine. The next day, the charity foundation where she once volunteered reached out. They were hosting their annual Families in Trust event. Irony, it seems, has excellent timing. They wanted me to speak about resilience, forgiveness, and starting over. I accepted. The hall was full that night. Polished faces, whispered gossip, small-town grace covering big-city cruelty. I walked to the podium slowly, my cane tapping a rhythm that sounded like calm authority. "Good evening," I began. I was asked to speak about trust, and I'll tell you, trust isn't something you give. It's something people either honor or break. A murmur rippled through the audience. I caught sight of her in the back, Nora, sitting alone, pale, hollow, pretending not to be seen. Her once perfect posture had wilted into something human. I continued. "Sometimes," I said, "we open our homes to people who only came to rearrange our peace. They call it love. They call it care. But what they mean is control." Eyes turned toward her. She knew. She could feel it, the slow suffocation of exposure. I held up a sheet of paper, a copy of one of her forged forms, names redacted but obvious to anyone who'd heard the whispers. "This," I said, "is what happens when you underestimate quiet people. We don't shout, we document." The audience gasped. Nora rose halfway, as if to protest, then sat back down. Her face crumpled under the weight of public truth, the kind you can't out-talk, outcry, or outlive. I didn't gloat. I simply finished my speech. "Forgiveness," I said, "isn't pretending it didn't happen. It's knowing it did, and choosing not to let it define you anymore." When I left the stage, people stood. Not for drama, for recognition. Because every woman in that room had once been silenced by someone she trusted. Outside, the air was cold and clean. My son was waiting by the car. He looked at me like he hadn't in years, with awe and something else. Respect. "Mom," he said quietly, "I didn't know you were capable of all that." I smiled faintly. "You raised me to survive storms. You just forgot I was the one who taught you how." He hesitated, then asked, "What happens to her now?" I looked up at the sky, clear at last, moonlight pouring over the wet pavement. "She'll have to live," I said, "and that's punishment enough." Because real justice isn't about seeing your enemy fall. It's about watching them walk through the ruins they built, knowing you'll never have to follow them there. That night, I returned home and sat by the window with my tea. The jasmine bloomed again, soft and fragrant, forgiving despite everything. The same way I'd learned to forgive. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved to breathe again. I looked at the reflection of my son in the glass as he locked the door. For the first time, he looked like the boy who once promised, "Mom, I'll never leave you behind." And this time, I believed him. Justice doesn't roar. It whispers, "You're safe now." And that whisper is louder than any apology she could ever give. Peace doesn't arrive like lightning. It tiptoes in when the house finally stops echoing someone else's name. Weeks passed after that charity night. The town had moved on to new gossip, someone's divorce, someone's business failing. But for me, time began to slow in the best way. Every morning I brewed my jasmine tea, the same ritual, same scent, only now the air around it was clean. No fear, no performance, Just quiet mornings and honest light spilling through the kitchen window. My son moved back home for a while, not because he needed to, but because, for the first time, he wanted to. He'd fix the porch steps, mow the lawn, bring in groceries like it was a new kind of apology. Not in words, in actions. The way men who finally see the truth say sorry. Sometimes I'd find him sitting on the back porch, staring into the yard where the roses had begun to bloom again. He'd ask small questions, the kind that sound casual but weigh heavy underneath. "Did you ever stop loving her, Mom?" I'd sip my tea and answer gently, "I stopped loving the version of her that never existed." He'd nod, quiet, understanding more with each breath. Healing doesn't need closure speeches. It just needs silence that doesn't hurt anymore. One afternoon, he brought home a box from storage. Old family photos, keepsakes, pieces of the past we'd both been too afraid to face. As we sorted through them, I found one, a picture of the three of us. Me, him, and Nora. We were smiling, or at least pretending to. Her hand on his shoulder, my smile too wide to be real. He looked at it, then at me. Should we throw it away? I shook my head. No, keep it. Not every reminder needs to be erased. Some are just proof that we survived. He placed the photo back in the box carefully, like setting a ghost down to rest. That evening, I walked through the garden. The rain from the previous night had left everything glistening, leaves shining, soil dark and rich. Nature doesn't hold grudges. It just regrows. Maybe that's why I loved it so much. It never asked for revenge, only balance. The jasmine plant was in full bloom again. Its petals were white, perfect, unapologetic. I brushed my fingers across them and whispered, "You see? We made it." For the first time in years, my heart didn't beat with defense. It beat with gratitude, not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd learned to keep. Later that night, as I locked the doors, I noticed the house was finally still. No whispers in the walls, no footsteps that didn't belong, just the soft hum of life returning to its rhythm. I sat by the window, my tea warm between my palms, and thought about Nora. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate is a chain, and I'd spent too many years dragging it behind me. Now I was done. Some nights I wondered where she went. If she found another place to wear her masks, another man to believe her smiles. But then I'd remind myself, that was no longer my story to watch. Mine ended here, in peace, in a house that no longer needed to prove anything. With a son who finally saw clearly, and a mother who learned that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the quietest kind of power. I took one last sip of tea and whispered to the empty room, "Justice doesn't shout, it exhales." The jasmine scent drifted through the open window, soft, steady, free. And for the first time in forever, I slept without listening for footsteps. It's been 5 years. 5 quiet, clean, merciful years. The house looks different now, softer somehow. The walls have been repainted, the curtains replaced, but the air still smells faintly of jasmine every morning. Peace has a scent, I've learned. It smells like something that once burned but refused to turn to ash. My son lives nearby now, 10 minutes away, maybe less if he drives slow. He visits every Sunday, brings groceries I don't need, flowers I didn't ask for, and stories I already love before he finishes telling them. He laughs easier these days, the kind of laugh that no longer apologizes. Sometimes we'll sit on the porch together, watching the sun dip behind the same road that once carried so much pain out of my life. That road used to mean endings. Now it just means distance. Safe, earned, deserved distance. He'll look at me sometimes and say, "You never told me how strong you really were," and I'll smile, slow and steady. "You were too busy watching the wrong people shine." He always laughs at that. Soft, proud, a little guilty, and I let him. Because we've both learned the same truth. Guilt is heavy, but grace is heavier. And it's worth carrying. I still keep the old teapot. The same one I used the night Nora came back dripping in rain and regret. Every now and then, I pour myself a cup, let the steam rise, and remember, not the pain, but the lesson. Sometimes, survival doesn't look like fighting. It looks like waiting, watching, and striking only once. When silence has done its job. They say revenge changes you. Maybe it does, but peace transforms you. And if I had to choose between the two, I'd still choose both, because peace without justice is just silence wearing perfume. Now, when I think about her, I don't feel anger. I feel distance. And that's the purest kind of freedom there is. So if you're listening to this, wondering if you should stay quiet or fight back, remember this. Sometimes, being pushed down is the universe teaching you how to stand taller. Sometimes being left behind is the fastest way to get ahead. Tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you forgive, or would you let silence finish what pain started? And if you've ever trusted the wrong people, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Because stories like these, they travel farther when hearts like yours hear them. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories. And tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from. I love to know how far these stories travel.